Good morning and welcome. Special welcome to Judd as our newly appointed member to this committee. Lovely to have you with us, Judd. Whilst you don't have voting rights, I expect you to be very noisy. I'd invite you to be noisy in terms of your views that you have to offer this committee. So a very warm welcome to you. We have an opening Karakia. I'm expecting you all to be horribly well behaved after Jenny's meeting yesterday. She set the tone. Not that you aren't horribly well behaved all the time. I oha ki runga ki a ranganui. I oha ki raro ki a papatuanuku. Turakina ngā mea kino ki te pai atia. Uhia mai o korowai aroha. He taonga mamato. Ka puta ki te whao tuat, ki te wā au, ki te au marama. Huie, huie, taikie. We acknowledge the things above, the sky, the universe and the heavens. We acknowledge those things below, the earth in all its entirety. Cast all negativity to the distant horizons. Cover us with the cloak of affection and love as a treasure bestowed upon us, so we may enter into enlightenment. Let it be bound and fixed. Yes, fixed, let it be agreed by all. A grand start to a meeting. Shall we stand and sing our Waiata, Iriri? We're not having the music?
Don't want the music?
Don't want the
if
music?
If you don't want the music, that's fine.
Oh, we're primed and ready, I think.
Oh, Glenda's got it. Awesome. Go, Glenda.
Go. Mai te kia hui manga i tangaro. Ka waka piri a mai nā rapiringa. Iringa ko tama upoko tupo po te ke. Ko te awa. Te awa ko o te awa ko e re te awa Beautiful. Thank you, Glenda. Thank you, everybody. Nice work. Do we have any apologies?
None as of this morning. Have you received anything from Rob?
No.
No. Okay, yeah, no, we don't have any, because I do remember something about Rob. I'm just going to check. Just going to double check and make sure.
Sure.
Oh, so he'll be arriving late this morning. Cool, no apologies, Rob's coming late.
So we have one apology for lateness from Councillor Vinson. I'll move that we accept that apology. Thank you. All those in favour? Against, carried. Thank you. That's all good, Shane. Any declarations of interest in relation to today's agenda? Nope. Well, feel free to, if it occurs to you when we are going through an item or at the start of an item, please don't be shy about bringing it to the meeting's attention. It's all good. Reports to our committee. The Cemeteries and Crematoria Bylaw, which is up for our review and discussion. The view, come forward, Elise and Hannah. The view being to approve this proposal for consultation. Welcome. Good morning.
Morena, kia ora tātou. Thank you for having us. I just want to say briefly, we are trialling a slightly different approach. As you'll see, there are slides on the screen, but the slides are more for those who are joining us online. just so they're aware of where we're at in the agenda and helpful prompts up there. I noticed that a number of people were asking questions online, so I thought this may be a helpful way. So really welcome any feedback. If this is helpful, we can adjust it, change it, get rid of it if you don't like it, but just wanted to let you know that we're trying to be a bit innovative.
Fantastic. Does that mean that your discussion's not going to necessarily follow the slides on the screen?
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
It won't necessarily follow that. And the slides are fairly simple, but really just trialling this. We didn't want to overdo death by PowerPoint. So welcome feedback on that.
Great.
So Hannah will lead the first item on cemeteries.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the review of the Cemeteries and Crematoria bylaw started with the statutory deadline for the bylaw itself. We took the opportunity to essentially do a first principles approach and really build up from the beginning how we want to manage cemeteries, crematoria and all that sort of thing within our district, which is one of the reasons why it took, I think, about 18 months. Also, we had some indication that there was going to be statutory reform around the Burials and Cremations Act. So we kind of hoped that there would be some guidance from central government as to what that might look like, but unfortunately that hasn't eventuated and we are running up to the statutory deadline, so we're putting it through now. Which is not to say that it needs to be rushed through. I think we've done a fairly robust process and we should have time to comfortably get it through before August. So the sort of ground up approach that we took involved putting together an advisory group which had representatives from elected members and people concerned with heritage, tangata whenua, the Hindu community, just a good range of people who are specifically interested in cemeteries and burial and that kind of thing within the district, representing cultural needs, practical needs, all that sort of thing. Funeral directors as well. So yeah, just kind of a targeted but a broad brush so that we can get the people who really know what the needs are and the way things are currently operating. So we came down to a list of principles that we think would be best to guide the management of cemeteries and crematoria, which are environmental sustainability, inclusivity and accessibility, safety, general comfort and usability, and respecting and honouring our past. In addition to that, we came up with a list of 4 specific issues that that are important enough that we want to kind of address them specifically outside of that framework, which are a place to scatter ashes, specifically in water, through the advisory group process and through the survey that we conducted that I forgot to mention earlier. We became aware that there are people who do have either an individual interest or a cultural need to scatter ashes in running water specifically, but that wasn't being dealt with currently within the community. There is the issue of the bylaw, because of course this is also a bylaw review, so we need to follow the Local Government Act and make sure that everything's right with that. Issues around maintenance and cleaning of graves and the consumption of alcohol within cemeteries. I think. So the consultation that we're asking for approval today will run from the 27th of February to the 16th of April. Hearings can follow fairly soon after that, and we're hoping for deliberations to be dealt with sometime in May so that we can bring forward a recommendation from the deliberations into the annual plan, because if we, at the moment, we're proposing a fountain as a place to scatter ashes, and if we're going to do that, we need to allocate budget. So we're kind of trying to dovetail the deliberations so that that can just follow through to the deliberations for the annual plan, which are on the 30th of May.
And as Hannah said, we do have that deadline of 30 August. We have been waiting for that direction from central government, which hasn't come. So we will, we suggest that we go ahead with this process and I adopt the final bylaw by 30 August, which may include changes through the consultation process. But if we don't do that, we lose the whole bylaw. So we need to make sure that we meet that deadline. And we know, this is a busy time for everyone, but this is a critical issue and we have been working on it. So it's really important to us that we allow enough time for that consultation, enough room for hearings and deliberations, but that we also get that in that time frame that we've mentioned. And the fountain proposal is it's a collaborative solution that has been come together through the discussion of the Hindu community and tangata whenua specifically, as we know, with the sacredness of the awa and of our water bodies, scattering ashes in them is tapu. So if this was to go ahead, this would allow that practice to happen, both for that community and for any other individuals who wish to. And it would be a New Zealand first. So there are no other fountains like this in New Zealand that would work in this way. So it would be a unique outcome, but we still need to run that consultation process. So those are the key points. Otherwise, we will take the papers read and happy to take questions.
Everybody's warming up, so I'll ask a couple of questions. I'm just wondering, it's not 2 o'clock yet. My question is around a fountain. I'm just wondering, and this is a question, whether water feature wouldn't be a better kind of frame. I guess fountain says to me something, and it might not necessarily look like that.
The crucial part, the fountain is, I guess, not necessarily a completely descriptive term. The important part is that there is running water, essentially. We're still working on the design and what that would look like, primarily through consultation with the Hindu community, because they were the ones who primarily felt that there was a need for this, although obviously this is something that would be available to the entire community. The important part is running water. It's not something that will have like a central spout that's shooting up in the air.
Yeah, I get that. Thank you. But yeah, I just wondered if the descriptor might be better as water feature, because it's not.
We can,
just
we can
that.
definitely change that. So we have.
Well, you think about it, whether it's, I'm just thinking, especially from older members of the community, it might have the centrals.
Yeah, it might sound more stagnant rather than, I think the image is more that water comes
moving
down from
water,
the top and it
yes.
flows through, rather than a central feature. And this fountain would be available, if it goes ahead, it would be available to all community members. It could be booked through this through our cemetery service. So that would be something that would be of use. Would not be restricted in that way.
And I understand too, because I've been involved in all of these consultation or pre-consultation meetings. I understand that there might be funding available in the community to support a water feature. Yeah,
they have said they will bring funding for this.
Great, thank you. Helen, you had a question?
I did. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In terms of consultation, pre-consultation to this document, page 10, you refer to officers put together an advisory group containing members of the community with a special interest in our cemeteries. These included people involved with heritage buildings, cemetery managers and local cultural groups. I would assume that also included all of the, I can't think of the word now, the undertakers?
Yes, that was added.
Yes, okay. That would be my main question.
Apologies, that table isn't an exhaustive list, but yes, they were.
Yeah, I just thought that was a key one, so perhaps would have been in
Absolutely,
there.
there were 2 undertakers from different firms at most of the meetings.
Excellent.
And certainly Craig
Well done,
Cleveland
thank
was
you.
there at all of them. Charlie?
Thank you. I too am interested in the fountain. What actually happens to the ashes? Are they put in the fountain and then they're recovered again, or are they lost?
So part of the process at the moment, at the stage that we're in with discussions, is talking to the infrastructure people who will design the base, and as basically to answer that question, what happens to the ashes, how we can ensure that the water is continues to be clean. So that will be dealt with, but currently we don't have a direct answer to that question, because that's still something that we're working on.
Okay.
There are, I believe, I'm not sure if this came up, Kate, but there are different models internationally. So we haven't got to that stage of designing the fountain because we first need to run this process. I understand there are systems where the water can be reticulated or returned to a site at the cemetery, so back into the ground at the cemetery. So there are ways and pipe systems and ways in which it can work. So sorry, we don't have the engineering detail yet, but that will be worked through in the design phase if it goes ahead.
Thank you. Another question is disinterment. It seems interesting to me there's no legal response or cover for this. It's just pretty well open, isn't it? There's three reasons.
Do you want to talk to that person?
Page 63.
Yep. Basically, that comes from the Act. Basically, it's just so disinterment is covered under the Act,
Okay.
and effectively those are reasonable. Or if the process is basically set by us to basically say, oh, look, it must
So the process for disinterment is handled under the Act. So we've set the process, but so this comes from the Act, and these are the reasons for why disinterment is discouraged.
That's in relation to natural burials. That's out of that policy or bylaw, Charlie.
Is it?
Yeah, so in a natural burial, there's no casket. It's a body wrapped in a shroud, essentially.
Okay.
So that's why
Yes.
disinterment
Well,
is discouraged for that reason.
Does it say
Pardon?
anywhere in here where, as far as a casket, you need some sort of legal permission to do
Is
this?
your question around disinterment, and are there legal guidelines about when that can occur?
Yes.
Are you able to answer that question?
Natural burials more broadly are there.
Yeah, so that's what's handled under the Act, is how to handle disinterment. This section that you've referred to is specifically in relation to natural burials, and the goal of natural burials is to be as natural as possible. So there's no embalming, there are sometimes caskets, I believe, but only non-treated wood.
Yeah.
The goal is that everything decays as naturally as possible. So disinterment, specifically of natural burials, is
Okay.
preferable to avoid.
Any more questions, Charlie?
Thank you.
No? Good. Ross?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two things. The fountain word, back in Perth, Karakia, they have a running stream, a beautiful pebble stream that runs into a pond. But the idea is that people sprinkle the ashes into flowing water that goes across stones. And that was consulted with the Indian community, particularly, and some Indigenous, the Aboriginal people also consulted on that. So I just thought I'd throw that into the mix. A running stream is very attractive. The second thing is, it might sound like a tangent, but under the principles of environmental sustainability, I am now aware that, this might sound awful, crematoriums, they do, when a cremation takes place, large amounts of CO2 goes into the environment, large amounts. And there is a process in the United States now where they've developed I got the information, environmentally friendly way of decomposing the remains of people who have passed, and it's virtually CO2 free. So I just wonder whether you'd be receptive to me forwarding that information to you. It's not cheap, but it's environmentally friendly.
I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to
Ross.
see, and we can forward it to our parks team.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I know the crematoria is not that old, or the furnace in it
Yeah.
is not that old. So, yeah, certainly something to consider on the mix. So thank you for that. Peter?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My concern also lies around the sustainability and climate change, and that is rising water tables. And I know personally that one of our cemeteries up on the way to Fordell is rising. Having personal experience and seeing it.
Yep.
The also on Aramaho, it is a floodplain, and if the water table rises, are there issues and have they been considered?
So that was discussed at the meeting, and I'm sure you can relay what came from there, the concern around water in the graves.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that has been raised and addressed and discussed. It is a known issue, and as you say, Peter, with climate change and the changing environment, things are unpredictable right now. The water table is high, and it's unpredictable when graves are dug as to how much water there will be. What has been done is that there's a process in place. So funeral directors are obviously well aware of this, and so from the very start of the process, when they meet with whānau and family, they say, this is the situation in the Aramoho Cemetery. We have a high water table. They do make recommendations that graves are dug where possible side by side rather than too deep. And so they just make people aware of the situation and high table. Then what happens is when the graves are dug by the sexton, they will pump the water out of the grave before the family arrives so that the water will be removed. That process is well in place. And the feedback is that process is working at the moment. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about the current situation other than making sure we've got that good practice and process in place and communicating really well with our community about it. Obviously, if the situation changes, then I imagine this will need to be reassessed. But for now, we are comfortable that the practice in place is working as best as it can.
I think also it's important to bear in mind that specifically with the changing situation, it's more appropriate to deal with this at an operational level than in documentation, because we need to be able to adapt our practice as the situation develops.
Yeah, understood.
Any further questions, Peter? Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, thank you. So feel free to tell me if this is not relevant to this particular discussion, but I see the word cemeteries there, and I'm just wondering. I actually don't know. Do we have enough room in our cemeteries? It's dare I say it, a growing business, and has that been considered as part of this?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Justin's saying we have a reasonable amount of space.
Yeah.
I cannot, I haven't been involved in the discussions on that, so I can't add further, but... Sorry.
Through the chair, sorry. One of the things that we have in our council KPIs is basically a minimum of 5 years space in our cemeteries. We have, as part of the lawn area, there's actually quite ample area for berms, but actually most of at the moment, we actually have far more cremations than we actually do have of actual burials, so that actually gives us more space in terms of overall. So that's just some of the things to take into account.
Yeah. Thank you. Right.
Michael? Thanks, Justin.
Just a clarification, as my understanding, with regards to cremation, obviously water is tapu. I guess, what are the restrictions? For instance, I'm being cremated and put into a tree, and you'll see this oak tree and go, that's Michael Law. And opposite me is Glenlogan Rose Garden that has a whole bunch of roses being grown out of the cremation ashes, right? So to me, there's not a problem with space because that's where the trend's heading. So is there restrictions on that I'm unaware of?
Not that we're aware of. So the issue, so the tapu issue and the water feature is specifically for dealing with ashes into running water.
Okay.
There are areas where you can dispose of ashes. That's fairly well catered for. The specific need that we're talking about and where there have been issues is into running water, because obviously the natural running water in the district is the awa. So it's
a Manawhenua thing for the awa issue.
Specifically running water.
That clarifies. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? No. All right, then I suggest we put the recommendations that we have up there, that the Strategy and Policy Committee, actually, just before I get there, I am going to suggest a few changes. I noticed that you've got Maxwell Cemetery in here. Is it still Maxwell Cemetery or is it Pākaraka? So could we perhaps put in brackets after it, if it hasn't been renamed, that it's Pākaraka, or would that be inappropriate?
The cemetery itself hasn't yet been renamed, so the town has, but there's a process still to go through for the renaming of other sites such as the hall and the cemetery.
Cool. All right, thank you. So back to the recommendation. Thank you. I will read it if you don't. Thank you. That the Strategy and Policy Committee adopts the statement of proposal on the review of the Cemeteries and Crematoria Bylaw 2023 for consultation, subject to any minor amendments. We confirm that a bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the issues arising from misuse of cemeteries in the district. The amended Cemeteries, Crematoria, Plaques and Memorials Bylaw 2023 is the most appropriate form of a bylaw, and the amended Cemeteries, Crematoria, Plaques and Memorials Bylaw 2023 is not inconsistent with the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990. So that's been moved by Helen. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Jenny. And we'll allow a little bit of discussion if you'd like to make a comment. I'd just say that for those of us that are new to this table, those last bits are fairly standard in terms of when we're putting a bylaw out for consultation. Just in terms of the Bill of Rights, it's not specific to. I think I'm right here. It's kind of normal business to add those tech on, so it's not specific to the specific bylaw. Any comments?
I have a clarification though. I'm assuming we're not liable for agreeing and voting on those specific things. We're agreeing that those last two things, I agree they have to go in, but us voting on it, I'm assuming we're covered by the fact that David has checked those wording and it's all accurate.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Josh.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly acknowledge the officers, particularly Hannah, Elise and Justin, for what I thought was a really careful navigation of some of the quite sensitive cultural issues that inevitably became part of this proposal. Some of those issues had the potential to spark quite a number of sensitivities, and I just want to commend you all on how you handled that and the end result that we've got to in terms of going up for consultation. So thank you.
Yeah. I'll add my thanks to Hannah, Justin and Elise too. And we had park staff at some of the meetings. I was really happy to be part of the process and proud of the way that we engaged with members of the community over this, and I think there was a lot of information shared and it was a really good process. I think your paper's very good. I really like the amendments that we've made to the existing bylaw and look forward to feedback from the community. Andrew.
I'll just continue that theme of thank you as well, because I've personally spoken to a number of members of the Indian community, and this has been a big topic for them for a long time, and the way that you've gone about honouring both them as well as tangata whenua is awesome. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Those are the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to page 67, Community Views Survey. Before I invite Elise and Hannah to speak, I want us to be very aware that this paper is about, yes, it's about feedback and it's about how our community are feeling, but it's also about where to going forward. and I think there's been a very good effort by council officers to actually provide the information, but not only do that, but provide the way forward. So I'd really like our discussion to focus on the way, what's been suggested in terms of the way forward, and if there might be any suggestions or amendments there. Thank you, Elise. I think the Chief Executive wants to have a chip in here just before you speak. Thanks, Elise.
Yes, through you, Madam Chairman, without stealing the thunder of the team, I did just want to toe-talk what the Chair has said here. I'm conscious in previous years the Council has received these reports and has been very much focused on the result and the analysis and the statistical methods that has underpinned the survey. That's all good, and I don't want to stop you going into that territory today if you really want to. However, in my view, they've been kind of so what reports without a next steps and some kind of commitment to action to make improvements. So that's the key point of difference with this report is we want the emphasis more to be on, do you support the improvements that management are proposing so that we can make some progress towards delivering better quality services to our community. On that note, I'll hand over to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Kate. So this is the Community View Survey from 2022. The survey is one tool Council has to report on our performance, and it is really important that we do this survey in terms of our measures and targets in the long-term plan. The survey is delivered on an annual basis and primarily measures Whanganui residents' satisfaction with council services and facilities, as well as their general perceptions of around safety, wellbeing, belonging, standard of living, as just well as an assessment of what Whanganui provides and its look and feel. So I wanted to start as thanks to David and Kate, just setting some of the context for the survey and how we've approached it differently. So as David has mentioned, what we did this year was we took the survey results, sorry, I'm saying this year, meaning the last year. We took those results and we developed an action plan, which is really focusing in on a few high impact actions that we can take forward. We're all aware of the increasing pressures on council budget, staff availability, so it was really critical to hone in rather than trying to address everything that is raised in the survey. But we also have an important function to report back to the community on the survey and what the results were. So I will be going through some of the results shortly. So before I do that, I do just want to put this survey in context. I'm sure we're all very well aware of the context. Everyone has lived through COVID and the pandemic, and you're all very well aware of how much it has impacted on all of our lives, personally and for the community. We've seen, obviously, these economic shocks, the housing shocks, the government reforms. We're currently under a bit of an avalanche of reforms coming our way. And I also just wanted to highlight the local election period. We received the final, I believe, of this report in September last year. So we weren't able to bring that to the last council meeting of the year because it was too tight. And so this is why we're bringing it now. So in a normal year, we would be bringing this about October in the year. So that's the context. In terms of the methodology, this was ran again by Versus Research. But what we did differently this time was we promoted it really broadly to the whole community. So council promoted it itself. We received over 650 responses, which Versus then cut back to 515 in order to be comparable with previous years. So we got a much higher response rate. We did this online only. So in previous years, we have used Versus to do phone calls. Now, we know that is limited. We chose to do that for two reasons. One was what we were finding from the phone calls was we were only reaching a limited number of people who were able to answer their phone, who were home during the day. The demographics were limited. But it also, we made some significant cost savings by running it differently this year, by having council promote it, and by doing it online only. With all that in mind, the demographics were still skewed to those over 65 and New Zealand European. So I just wanted to put that in context as when you're thinking about the results, that we have approached it differently. And as mentioned, we've also developed the action plan that you will find on page 73 of the report. So in terms of reporting back, I will run through these stats. I will run through fairly quickly. This is these slides up on the screen here are, as mentioned, for those at home to be able to see some of the key results. So the most popular cultural activities, using a library, visiting or using Wanganui Airport, or being actively involved in a community organisation. And we did see decreases in attending performance at the Opera House, which is to be expected, given the last year there were numerous lockdowns and closures and cancellations, so that is all incredibly understandable. And we saw a drop in residents rating the Wanganui district as creative, but still remaining high at 78%. In terms of recreational, most popular activities include visiting a premier park, a beach, or using the river or park walkways. And we see a year-on-year increase in the use of those walkways, including those cycle lanes and those cycleways. But as has been fairly well documented, and we discussed this when we went through our open spaces physical activity strategy last year, decreases are seen across a number of activities, including participation in sport and use of Cook's Garden. And in a new question for 2022, we asked how frequently residents engage in physical activity for at least 30 minutes, and 37% said they exercise 3 to 5 times a week. Emergency planning, so just really top findings, 92% of the community indicate they could survive for at least 3 days in an emergency without outside assistance. 31% saying they could survive more than a week, and 43% saying they have an emergency kit. And those numbers actually went up in 2022. So I think with the recent events as well, I think we can expect that, or we would hope that to go up as well. Wellbeing and belonging, 49% rate their wellbeing as high or very high, only 9% rating it poorly. 80% of residents rating their standard of living as good or extremely good, a drop from the previous year, and 81% of residents stating they were satisfied with living in Wanganui. And 80% of residents felt their quality of life had improved or remained the same, but 18% felt it was worse. So I think that the context set there is important. We see high satisfaction with the library, the museum and the Opera House, and still good satisfaction with town centre and public art, but some drops there, as well as drops with animal control. 51% of residents satisfied with the roads, and on par with last year, 57% satisfied or very satisfied with the footpaths, and 40% satisfied with waste services. So that was a decrease, and key comments were around not having recycling services available in Wanganui, which obviously the council is committed to bring in a recycling service in the future, so that's good. And just very quickly, 32% of residents rated council's response to the community needs and issues well. 29% of residents rated performance of mayor and councillors as good. 39% of residents rated the performance of council's staff as good. And 53% of residents are satisfied with the ease of access to council's information. So look, we don't want to go over those numbers laboriously, but in terms of our commitment to report back to the community and to thank everyone who took part in the survey, I felt it was important to at least give a snapshot, and particularly for those who are listening online, to be able to highlight some of the findings, as I know they don't have the paper necessarily in front of them as you all do. So in terms of next steps, we will share the full report on our website. For the survey we need to put out this year, we will make some small improvements and efficiencies, and we will be reporting back on the survey results for this year before the end of the year. However, we don't propose a full-scale review. We propose more to focus on the action plan, implementing the actions in that, and then doing a full review later in the year so that we can implement a new approach for the long-term plan. So we're basically saying we will continue for this year, we will make improvements where we can, but we're not going to fully change the whole approach. We're going to be more focusing on the action plan and then working towards a new approach to align with the long-term plan. So that's the end of the presentation. Otherwise, I will take the paper as read and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Elise. Jenny, Charlie, then Andrew.
Thank you very much for a really good report. My first question is around the methodology, and by not using the phone survey at all, has that skewed the demographic away from our older community and given a different result?
No, it definitely has not skewed it away from the older demographic, but I think in terms of methodology, if you are having a discussion with someone on a phone, as opposed to just filling something out online, you may get a different result. So potentially some of the results will reflect that.
Yep.
That it's not.
I understand.
Yeah, it's not as much as a discussion as a tick the box.
Yeah.
So it does have limitations in that respect.
Yeah. All good. And my other question is, this is being called an annual survey, but I thought we did the local survey one year and the perception survey the following year and kind of alternated them. But I may have kind of, maybe accessing an old file, but
We have to do, this is the annual one, we have to do it every year, and that's because of our long-term plan targets. So we have to every year report in the annual report on them. So there's a minimum requirement to do it, but the National Perception Survey is every 2 years.
Yeah. Thank you.
Charlie?
Thank you. Yes, this is a huge body of work, isn't it? On page 71, I'm just a bit interested how you set your long-term plan targets. You've got mayor and councillors 50%, which is pretty sad, isn't it?
Hey, Charlie, I'm just going to make a small correction to your question. You said, how do you set your long-term targets? It's how do we set our long-term targets?
I would have thought those figures should be 100% through there as a goal.
I believe it's based on previous information that we have and trends. So it's never been 100% and it's always been relatively low, and we're still we're in a time of where I think it'll be very difficult to achieve 100%, but I do like your ambition.
So you answered my question. It's actually a trend.
Yeah.
It's on previous
It's based
results.
on previous trends,
Yep.
exactly. And you will all be involved through the long-term plan and setting and these targets and being involved in that discussion. I know David has some thoughts about the future in terms of setting our targets. Don't want to put him on the spot, but that's part of why we're not proposing to launch a full-scale change this year. We want some time and to align it with the long-term plan process to then set some new targets. So you will see a similar target this year when we report on it, but when you set your new long-term plan targets, that's your opportunity to reset.
Charlie, you need your mic on, please. You finished? All right, very good. Andrew.
Yeah, no, thank you for this. It's great to have real data. So my question is this a bespoke survey for Whanganui, or is it something that's done nationwide across all councils?
It's definitely done nationwide. There are different approaches to the survey, different providers, but this will be something that I expect almost all councils will need to do to meet their long-term plan.
Okay, so a follow-up question from that then is, how do we, well, I can see we've got a comparison year on year, great. Can we compare to other councils?
Yes, this is the trend absolutely across the board.
Right.
And this is what Versus has said. All councils have seen this trend, and particularly last year we all know it was a very difficult year. There were a number of challenges. We had obviously the protests and, there was, we're not an outlier.
So the question though is, can we compare the numbers with the average council across New Zealand here?
I would say we can.
Right.
Yeah. To a certain,
I don't
to
know
a
whether-
certain extent. Obviously, there are some things unique to Wanganui, but this is the trend that we've seen. We've dug up a number of other councils' reports. This is the general trend, and versus who conducted the research said for the other councils they did it for, this was the same or similar result. Do you want to add something, David?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I think the Mayor is asking whether we can use this to benchmark our performance against our peers. The answer to that is yes, where we can get hold of their reports and they've used similar questions, absolutely we can do that.
Yeah, sorry if that question wasn't clear. That was the idea, is to see how we compare to other...
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, great. That would be useful, I think. Thank you.
Peter, have you turned yours on?
Sorry, but my question was already answered.
Thank you. Helen?
Yes, just for clarity, I understand that we can add questions specifically. I mean, this is not a set survey that every council was doing with only the same questions. We can add questions, we can massage questions so that if we've got areas that we want to look at. Is that correct?
Yes, we can. What we did for 2022 was we actually cut back the number of questions quite substantially. I can't remember the exact number, but we trimmed it back. So we're reluctant, it already is quite long, we're reluctant to make it longer, but if there are things that we want to add, there's no reason we can't do that.
Through you, Madam Chair, just a comment on that and the last question, because one of the other points of difference that I maybe should have mentioned in my introduction is we haven't just looked at the survey results in isolation when we formulated the action plan. This survey is just one piece of feedback data that we're getting from our community and customers. We also have the point of use surveys, the smiley face iPads at the front counter. We have 20-odd thousand service requests coming to us every year and a number of complaints and other bits of feedback and opinion from our community. So what we've tried to do is pull that sum total of feedback together and take a holistic approach to what are our community and customers telling us we need to do more of because they like it and do less of, or do differently because they don't like it.
Any further questions? Michael?
Hey, obviously going through the data on the split, my first question is, are you asking for their sex or gender on male and female?
And diverse.
Gender, so we need to make it, because that would put a proportion of a population off from answering their questions. The ethnicity breakdown, we have 41 people saying other. Do we have any feedback on why they chose other? Because we should only have 2% of other in the population.
No, we don't, but
That's all right.
I can go back to Versus and get more information if that's helpful.
Yeah, for me, it's helpful because it does look like we're missing a whole population of Māori and Pacific Islanders. Asian seems fine, European seems fine. And do we have any reasons why males are 65%? Like, is it just because they're more likely to do it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting result. They seem to be the most likely group to answer the survey and want to provide feedback.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And just the last question then is, how long does this survey take?
It takes about, I think they say about 10 minutes to take, and that is still quite a bit of time for some people, so that's part of why we want to keep it fairly succinct. Also, on page, in the appendix, the full survey is there. Question 38 is gender, so we're asking gender, and then ethnicity. Obviously, you can see those groups there: New Zealand, European, Māori, Pacific, Asian, Middle Eastern, Latin, African, and then other. So, potentially, I'm surmising, but potentially what we need to do is provide multiple options, because I imagine some people maybe identifying with multiple groups. Or it's driven by census data, Louise is just confirmed.
Okay.
So those are the brackets that are in the census. So we try to mirror that as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, because that's probably one of my biggest questions. You can't answer now, but we had similar problems with people who identify as Pacifica Islander as well as Māori, or Pacifica Islander and European, and they choose other, and then we've got bad data. So thank you for that.
Josh.
Thank you. Thanks, Elise. My question is about the action plan and the process for monitoring that going forward.
Well done.
So you've in the report you talk about next steps and reviewing the measures and so on. But in terms of the action plan itself, what does that look like going into future surveys? I mean, is the intention to report back against the actions identified in time for the next survey, or I mean, what does that look like?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think the most appropriate way for us to report back to Council is through the Operations and Performance Committee. So this committee, you've received the feedback, you've decided what you're going to do. Officers will now go and do, and then report our performance and our effectiveness through that relevant committee.
I guess what I'm wanting to understand, though, is because a lot of these actions are items that would come out of the long-term plan, for instance, or annual plans. Is there going to be an effort made to specifically link the reporting back to, okay, this was an issue identified in the community views survey and we're reporting back particularly to deal with a concern raised in the statistics from the survey?
So through you, Madam Chair, I think the general response I'm going to give you, and I hope it'll answer the question, is one of our intentions is through the Operations and Performance Committee is to start providing benefits realisation reports. So for notable or large projects, once we've completed them, we'll then check, did we achieve the benefits that were stated in the original business case, and were we effective? That's not exclusive to projects, though. So operational initiatives and in response to critical pieces of customer feedback, we can deliver similar benefits realisation reports. We got this feedback that identified a problem. We responded in this way. Did it work? If not, what did we learn? So that's the intention, and I think that's the broad answer that covers the specifics of your question, but happy to go more detailed if you want.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
No further questions? We'll put the recommendation then that the Strategy and Policy Committee requests the Chief Executive implement the proposed action plan. Ross is going to move that and Philippa will second it. Any discussion, debate before we put it? Philippa.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to particularly comment on the action plan. I think it's really, and it seems obvious and it's really good to see. But I guess, I'm just reading, the Prime Minister saying there's no point in sugarcoating it. We know there are some tough times ahead for the whole country as we work our way through a multi-billion-dollar issue that's affecting GDP-wise over 30% of our GDP in the country and region. And I guess my thought is it's actually really good to have this action plan, but we know in our discussions around the long-term plan, obviously what we're trying to do and keep our rates as low as they can for the community while deliver key services, etc. is, I guess I'm looking, as all of us and councillors doing their very best to step up and support our staff when we're pretty lean, when we kind of look at this action plan and we go, holy heck, how are we going to deliver? How are we going to, it's about partnerships. It's about, the community usually knows best. And if we probably went to we go out to the community, they would pretty much tell us what we've heard in this kind of survey. So I'm quite, while, it's, I guess there's there's lots of there's big challenges here, but I really think it's great to see the action plan, pretty clear, some good stuff happening, but we all need to be in this pot together to try and improve these community survey results and what's happening for our community. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Philippa. Jenny?
Thank you. I really appreciate the shift towards the action plan and away from just receiving data and then a full stop. I think that's really, really valuable. And I don't see within the action plan that it is massively resource heavy. I just think it's, in a sense, it's like continuous improvement or more focused improvement as opposed to a huge resource drop. And I'm sure if we become resource stretched, the plan will be altered, and we will accept that. So thank you.
Peter?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to comment on the Rural Community Board, since we have a representative here, and the results are extremely disappointing, I would say, and there's a lot of confusion out there about actually who the Rural Community Board is. Considering I was a chairperson, almost, yeah, a good reflection. My challenge then would be for the Rural Community Board to actually step up and make their presence really felt, and what actual benefits that they make in the next triennium.
Thank you, Peter. Any further debate? I'm sure Judd's up to the challenge. Thank you. Thanks to the team. Really appreciate the focus on the forward. Rear vision mirrors are great, but they're only there to inform how we drive forward. So thank you for that. That is the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on now to item 4.3, the government consultation update for February 2023. Hello, Elise. Fancy seeing you here.
I also have to apologise. I whacked my head extremely hard 2 weeks ago and I'm still struggling a bit, to be honest. So apologies if I'm not as coherent as I could be.
I think you're doing fine. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the feedback. So this item is about reporting back on the many submissions that Council has made on various government consultations. So it is about daylighting this, sharing it with our community, as well as signalling some of the ongoing consultations and reforms and reviews underway. And I think I used that word avalanche earlier, and it does feel a little bit like that to me at the moment, and it isn't necessarily that well coordinated. So I will just bring up for those at home who can't see the paper. This year, Council has made submissions on the inquiry into the 2022 local elections, sale and supply of alcohol community participation amendment bill, the Border Services legislation bill, the Natural and Built Environment bill, and the Spatial Planning bill, which is a reform of the RMA, and we're still working on our Future for Local Government review submission, which is open until 28 February. So I wanted to put that up there because there is an opportunity for all members of the community to submit on the Future for Local Government. That is not something that just councils submit on. So I have put the link there for anyone wishing to still go and do that. And then, unfortunately, due to the election timing and the various cycles of meetings, we weren't able to report back on the submissions we made last year, so I won't read them out, but we have listed them up there for you. And the discussion points are covered in the report for each of those submissions. So in terms of next steps, looking forward, our team will continue to monitor the consultations and opportunities. The third bill in the RM reform, the Climate Adaptation Bill, is yet to come up. No deadlines or timeframes as of yet. There's a number of things happening in the civil defence, emergency management space, and there are always other things that crop up. So you'll see we have a matrix for helping us to identify when we should submit on those. We need to really prioritise our effort. There is a lot happening, and it's a lot for our small team. And we do submit, obviously, where there's strong interest to Wanganui community and the council, and the process going forward, now we have the new committee established, is that we will be reporting regularly back to this committee on those submissions to allow that discussion and to allow the opportunity to share this with our community, because our community doesn't always know that we have been making these submissions in the background. It's enough from me, otherwise I will take the papers read. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. Questions? Rob.
Thank you. Just in terms of the consultation with the council as opposed to the public, I know that we had discussion about the Three Waters, the third bill, but as far as the the alcohol submission, what sort of discussion did we have as a council on that? Because I don't recall that one being sent out to us. Maybe, was it sent out?
Yes, that one was sent out by David, and things have been rather busy, and it may have been missed in that, but it certainly was sent out.
Elise, I think the question is in relation to council's consultation with the community in relation to the submission.
No, it's in relation to the consultation with the councillors, because our ability to comment on this, and I'm satisfied with the Three Waters one, but if you're telling me that I missed the one on the sale of alcohol, well, I apologise.
It was definitely sent out for comment and feedback to all elected members.
What about the one on the changes to the election system?
Yes, they were both sent out to all elected members.
Okay, so I just have a question on that then. In the changes to the election system, there's a mention about lowering the age. Are you saying in that submission that we as a council support the lowering of the age?
No, we're not. So this is one of the things that the inquiry will look into, is the question around lowering the age. So they will look at the question of the age.
Okay.
So we were saying we support you looking at that. However, we note last year when we surveyed the community, there was low support for the proposal. So we have not endorsed that outcome. We have said we agree with you investigating it further.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so these submissions are based on feedback that we get from interest groups. So, for example, the alcohol one, we had wide discussion around that, including Safer Wanganui and other interested groups, and it was shared around. Our ideal process is to have a workshop before submissions, but given the timing of many of these, that hasn't always been possible. So where possible, we will have a workshop. If that's not possible, it will be circulated out.
Okay, so there is an opposition there to doing away with the appeal process. Is there a consensus? Do you know whether there's a consensus around this table about that? Before this went into this document?
So the process for developing that submission, first of all, I should clarify, the appeal that's being talked about in the submission is, so part of the process, you may be aware, Auckland City Council has been in court for, I think, about 6 years trying to get a local alcohol policy through. So the reason that that is the case is because currently under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, anybody who submits on a council consultation for a local alcohol policy only can then appeal that policy to the court. So that's the appeal that's being taken away. It's not normal matters of process. It's not normal consultation. It's the ability for a council to go through a full consultation and have a proposed local alcohol policy and then be taken to court over whether or not they can actually implement it. Those are the appeals that are being taken away. So the process for developing the submission itself were to first consult internally and with relevant stakeholders where we developed our recommendations. We then posted it to all elected members with the intention that if there were any objections, we would be able to modify them and make the submission on that basis. As Elise said, if we'd had the opportunity, we would have taken it to a meeting or a workshop, but because of where the deadlines fell, that wasn't possible. So we used this process instead, which is still, as far as we're concerned, legally acceptable, but we accept as not ideal.
So when did this one come out to councillors, this draft?
I believe it was,
quite a few weeks ago.
yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago. It was the start of this month.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and we did provide a full week for feedback, and then even after the deadline had long passed, I was in touch with David and Andrew, who reviewed it, and there was plenty of time there for comment. So unfortunately, it seems it's missed. We'll do a better job of highlighting that, making sure they're highlighted.
Well,
Yeah, I would hesitate to suggest that you need to do a better job. I think, given the time frames and what's been happening and our resource, I think it was a very good job. I think what we need to do, I mean, maybe it could be added to the Friday updates, you know, as an extra highlight, but I'd also say that I was given the specific opportunity to approve it or not, and I was fine with it. So there has been quite an extensive process by officers to get that submission approved before it got sent. And the mayor's signed it.
Has it been sent, is it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Hopefully.
You finished, Rob? Yep. Helen?
Thank you. In terms of submissions on government legislation that particularly affect the farming rural community, we don't have any policy staff dedicated to that area, do we, or with specific interest or responsibility in that area? Would that be correct?
We don't, in general, have policy staff dedicated specifically to government consultation. We just kind of deal with it based on who has capacity to deal with a submission whenever it comes out.
Yeah, thank you for that. Can I ask, Judd, through the chair, is the Rural Community Board considering making a submission on the Arms Regulations Review of Fees 2022?
Well, I would hope so. I'm not really up to speed of what the Rural Community Board is, but we have put out, I did read a pānui about submissions recently, but I haven't heard anything about whether it's been moved on.
Oh, yes. Elise, do you know if there's something coming through? Because I presume if the Rural Community Board see an issue that affects the rural community that with legislation, that it comes through to your staff for creating?
Yes, so we regularly report to the Rural Board on the upcoming consultations. Peter will be familiar with this process and ask them which ones are of interest, and we do assist in drafting submissions or joining up with the council. We have a workshop this afternoon, so I suggest we put it on the agenda.
Yeah, so that's not one that's currently on the agenda?
No.
No. Thank you.
No further questions? I'll put the recommendation then that the Strategy and Policy Committee receive the report government consultation update for February 2023. I only said 22. Thanks, Glenda.
I'll second.
Thank you,
And
Helen.
I'd like to speak to it.
Who moved? Did you move, Kate?
Glenda moved that. Helen seconded it. Opportunities for comment? Go.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you to the staff. Look, I think we have exceptional staff making submissions on government policy. There's a huge amount being thrown at us at the moment, and it's very difficult to keep up with it. So I take my hat off to them over all the various issues that are affecting the community. I am concerned around the rural economy, really, in terms of how this council was representing them. The rural economy is the backbone of our economy. And I think much of New Zealand is losing sight of that, but particularly provincial New Zealand. Without a robust and healthy rural economy in terms of beef, sheep, cropping, everything, this town probably wouldn't exist. And when we think about it in terms of the staff that we have, we don't actually have a dedicated staff member that's thinking and breathing the rural economy. And except at Wanganui and Partners, we have one very good one, Colleen Sheldon. And that concerns me because when you think about it, we've got an arts facilitator, we've got a museum, we've got we have a lot of facilities, but in terms of the biggest business, we're not representing our farming economy enough. And my point is, it was myself that ensured that this council made a submission on the emissions tax, effectively, that's going to go on our farm animals. And when David and the team realised the impact on this town of reduced stock numbers, absolutely, our staff got behind that. We made a very good submission. The arms regulation review fees of 2022 is going to have likewise a very big impact on not the rural economy so much as everything from the ability of farmers to undertake pest control and actually then have even their friends up to do shooting on their farms because the fees are going up so high. So there are a number of things that come through that are not obvious as to us as a council, and I think we need to have a big think about that rural economy and how that is represented properly at the table. And I do appreciate the Rural Community Board is starting to take up some more challenge, but I think we need to have a real powwow about this. I am seriously concerned of the impact of government legislation, and this is not a political speech. The impact of government legislation on the rural community is such that we are looking at least a 20% reduction in stock numbers, at least. That is what this government wants, and they're going to drive it, and I think it'll be worse. When you think of how we rely on that, that's our milk production, that is your meat processing plant, that is your pulp processing plant, and all the stuff that farmers buy off the economy and then send in for processing. It is huge. So I just want to really highlight that, and I've said enough, and I look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Jenny.
Thank you. Two comments. One is I've been asked by a few people whether or not we're going to be submitting on the Therapeutic Products Bill. And although I think that's got considerable merit, and I'll probably be submitting on that myself personally, I think, when we put that through the matrix and we see the avalanche of other matters that we have to, that our team have to attend to, I think that makes it very difficult to submit on everything. It's just not feasible, even though I think it's got considerable merit. And then I just want to commend the team because the submissions the draft submissions that I've seen come through to us for comment, they've been outstanding. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the readability, and the content has been really outstanding. So I really want to thank you all for the dedicated effort that you put into producing those, because I learn a lot even just from reading them. It's a great summary document often of a particular matter. So thank you.
I think Rob was next.
Thank you. Thank you for these submissions, and they are, as it's been said here, very well written submissions. In fact, as far as the water services legislation bill, it's good to see some language which is a bit more forceful than what we've used in the past. I refer, we find it unacceptable for local government to be used to mop up the shortcomings in the reforms proposal and its implementation. Good on you for coming up with words like that. I'm not so keen on the alcohol, what's it called? The sale of alcohol. And I have an opposition to local alcohol policies, and I've mentioned this before. I think that local alcohol policies are an embarrassment. What it says about us is that we're not mature enough as a country to decide what our alcohol laws can be and have it across the country. Now, what's wrong with us? I'll bet you don't go to European countries and find every little village and small city having their own alcohol policies. I mean, what we're doing with a local alcohol policy is, okay, we'll have different rules to what you've got in Martin or in Palmerston North or whatever. You know, and I think that's immature. There's no need for it. The government should set the alcohol policies for the countries and we abide by it. I do want to talk, though, about the Water Services Legislation Bill. There's a few more hooks that come into this one that we didn't realise, you know, and it's been picked up in this submission. First of all, we talked about the language, which is good, but I'll just turn this over here, the Water Service Legislation Bill. We are very concerned to read in the Water Legislation Bill that Crown entities are exempt from infrastructure contribution charges. Wow. You know, I mean, here's this organisation being set up to provide services. Surely a school or a government department or whatever should pay for their water like you and I do. You know, and I think that that is appalling that that is in there. I know that they're exempt from rates, and that's probably what they say is the rationale behind this. I don't think there's any justification for being exempt from rates either. So thank you for pointing that out. We also wish to highlight the strong opposition to pass-through billing. And I don't think many of us realise that either, that when these 4 water service entities come into existence, the bills are going to come through this council probably to about 2029. You know, I mean, what we'll be doing is we have had a situation where we have billed for a regional council and we got the flack for that from our local people. Would judge the Wanganui District Council's bill by the bottom of the bill, which included the regional council, and we got rid of that. But here we're going to get rid of all the assets, we're going to get rid of any say in the services, but we're still going to send the bills out. You know, and thank you for highlighting that as well. The third thing that I think is really...
Rob, the clock's ticking, buddy.
Yeah. The third thing that is really concerning is that although we give away the assets, we still keep responsibility for the security if there's a failure of any of these water service entities. What a cheek of the government to do this. You know, to say, well, take your assets, but if one of these organisations becomes financially in trouble, we'll go back through the rating system and bill you to make it up. You know, I mean, I think that's horrific. And thank you for pointing that out as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Charlie?
Yeah, thank you. Just further to Councillor Craig's comments, hopefully this government will have a rethink about planting all our beautiful farms and pine trees. This weather event's proved that, you know, those trees, all that slash, have blocked the rivers, caused damming and huge damage we see today. I doubt they'll get it, and they'll probably still want to keep planting trees. But even the ones that are planted for carbon credits that will not be felled will one day fall down, and we'll have the same disaster in having Hawke's Bay all over again, multiple times. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Peter?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Craig actually stole a lot of my thunder, and I'm glad that she's advocating for the rural community. My second concern is about capacity of the policy team, and on the matrix, its capacity is only rated 3 points out of 10, and so I'd also like to commend them for their ability and submissions that they've made. Could we restructure the matrix to make that higher, please? The capacity team. That's a comment.
Thank you. We'll leave that for further consideration. Philippa.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the work done on all this. I'll be receiving this update, but I guess in regard to the sale and supply of alcohol amendment bill submission, I think we've done it. We're submitting on what's a terrible bill, really. And I totally support Councillor Vincent around, it's ridiculous a country of this size of these having district licensing committees, local alcohol policies. It's been proven they have no teeth. As soon as the cap was contested, the district licensing committee approved it, that cap, and I resigned 3 or 4 years ago from district licensing committee because it was really the only thing I could do to say, I have no. It's not about the people on them, but it's about it's just about this that the government's just being too weak. The power of the local, the power of the alcohol industry has to be dealt with at a national level. You can't even submit on an alcohol you can't even oppose an application if you live within a kilometre of where an outlet might be put. How ridiculous, because those are the people who are often most affected. So there's just so many. I guess our job, if we agree, is to just keep looking at how we can. Central government's got a bigger list of issues probably stumped on top of it now, but as some of us that are sat around the District Health Board will know, that when you ask the Chief Medical Officer what are the 3 biggest issues, and we're waiting to hear them talk about meth and P and other issues, they say alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. It's not that, of course, that alcohol is used wisely, is socially very acceptable and fine. Unlike, a puff of a smoke does actually hurt your health. It's not that, but it's the abuse of it, and it's particularly the effect of what our young people will do, and what do they call it? Stoking up, or whatever that word is, before they'll what is it? Preloading, etc. So just needed to make some noise. We need to keep making noise about this issue. And I'm sorry, but the district licensing committee, the problem is when you oppose and a district licensing committee has to sit, the fees there to district licensing committee members, including the councillor that will sit on it from our that's presently that sits on it and kind of has to sit on it. They're significant fees. It's just a whole big waste of money, and it's proving to be pretty ineffective, I would suggest to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. Michael, then Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a holistic and deliberate strategic direction of all central governments over the last 15 years. We're going to see more of these, and they are well equipped, high financed, with $650.5 million of Wanganui District's money going to support their centralisation plan. We're going to see more of these. They're going to come at us faster and more frequent with better marketing behind it that the people of the district will believe this is positive and amazing. And yet when you evaluate the policies, you know this is not in the best interest of our people. My colleagues are correct. This is a primary industries sector. We are impacted directly and indirectly by these changes. And I would like to say, first of all, we do a fantastic job. I love the wording of the I love the wording of the letters, but we need to do more. I don't know how we do more. Maybe my colleague Peter has an idea. Maybe we raise the budget on this. Maybe we have smarter campaigns around getting information. Does central government actually respond well to a letter from the council, or would they respond well to 42,000 people's signatures? I don't know. We need to start asking these questions. Regionalisation will lead to centralisation. Our regions are the core of New Zealand. Primary industries are the core of our GDP. To think that we can suddenly move to value-add products after 30, 40 years of commoditisation is insane. So I urge everyone here to start thinking about how can we do more to put pressure on central. And I don't just mean our current government, because that's just recently changed, and it may change again in this year. Both of our major parties are looking for centralisation, and we need to be very clear on our direction if we want to keep locals helping locals. Thank you.
Nice. Andrew.
Yeah, I'm probably wrapping up the general sentiment around the table here, and that is the first thing is thank you to the team that's put this together. I mean, the feedback is that you're doing a great job, and the language you're using is reflecting what we're thinking and our rhetoric. And I know how busy you are behind the scenes, and you come in here and present yourself, but you've had some big days. I understand that, so thank you. The second thing is just reinforcing what Helen said. We are, I don't know what the land area is of Wanganui district, but it is predominantly a rural area. Personally, I've got rural roots, and so I want to remind us all that we are Wanganui district, not Wanganui City Council. And that the rural community has an incredibly significant role to play in our community and our lives, and we just don't know it. And what I'm, just to Helen's point, a reduction in productivity on our rural farmlands is going to have an effect on our city and our lives, because I don't want to go into that into too much detail. You just play that out. So there's a real lag effect here of whatever we do now in 5 years' time, or whatever into the future, is going to have a destructive impact on our community. We just don't see it right now because it's got a lag. So that's the first point. The second thing is a reiteration of the sentiment around the table, and that's the continued dilution of localism. I've talked about that in my inauguration speech. The concept of localism is absolutely critical to us for a democracy. As we sit around the table, we are making decisions for Wanganui district. Yet, centralisation and control and a lack of hearing from central government, doesn't matter which side you're on. I'm not. It's not about Labor versus National or anything like that. I just don't feel that we are being heard. So we can put language out there in our submissions and our feedback, but we are not being heard at the moment. And this continued move away from localism towards centralisation and control, it just continues to just eat away at us. And I've said that we must continue to fight, and we will. It's an election year this year, and so I think that this is the year that we really need to go in hard. So I don't know what the solution is. I've got it doing a whole lot of stuff behind the scenes, but we all need to have some ideas to find out how we fight. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Ross, then Charlotte.
Yeah, I start with an apology. I referred to myself as a city councillor. I am a district councillor. My focus will widen from this moment on. Apologies for the incorrect use of my job role. The second thing is I noticed that in one of the earlier comments, I was looking at the thing on the website, and the largest percentage of people of our public that were accessing the website, the largest one was 20%, and the query was the rates. I would love to think that our community could evolve so that their outlook was wider than perhaps one subject. I'd like to be able to figure out how we can get the community involved in more topics. And what I liked about the submissions was the tone. I loved it, very assertive. I loved the short summaries at the end. And I wonder, in trying to engage our community more, I know a website and technology is the way most of us are going. But these submissions, we're making these on behalf of our district, our community, both rural and urban. I'm not sure whether their interest is there or whether we can cultivate their interest and awareness. It's a question, it's a hanging question. How can we get these submissions or a summary statement out into the press or the media or our website? How can we communicate this better? Because this is our bread and butter, where we're reporting to the government on behalf of our people. And I think it's not a criticism. I just want to know how we can expand that awareness and leave that question there.
Thank you, Ross. Charlotte.
My comment is actually, it carries on quite well from what Ross has said. The submissions process is democracy in action, and yeah, well done on all of these submissions. It's really fantastic. But just like Ross, I would love to see more education going out into the community with how to access the submissions process and how our community can feel empowered and engaged to be able to speak up on the issues that are important to them. I think obviously it is our officers' role and job to submit on behalf of us and on behalf of our community, but it cannot be completely up to us and our staff. It has to be down to every single one of our community members. So yeah, I would love to look into how we can all help educate our community and how our staff can start pushing through comms as well. Thanks.
Nice, thank you. Just a couple of comments that have largely been said, but I'll say them again as the chair. The depth of these submissions is impressive and of real credit to the team. The Water Services Legislation Bill submission has not only been a credit to the team, but it's been a credit to all of those around the table. It's been a long process developing the thinking, understanding what was proposed, and developing the submission. So there's been some comments around the flavour that's come through in that submission, and it has been very well worded, but I think that's been a real team effort, and I think everybody needs to be acknowledged for that is input to that. The sale and supply of alcohol submission, this council has long been active in this space and has been doing a really good job and should continue to, in my view. The fact that the whole system is broken in terms of the sale and supply of alcohol doesn't mean we should raise our hands in horror and walk away from it. Instead, we should continue to help make a silk purse, try and make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And so, yeah, I'd like to add my thanks to the team for, and this includes the wellbeings team and the policy team, because, as I say, we've long been involved, in this space, and I'm very proud of that. So thank you. Finally, this notion of subsidiarity, that's what it is, isn't it? That's the word. It needs to be in our language, and often that is the notion that for locals, by locals. Whatever we can do locally, we should do locally. Whatever needs to be done centrally can be done centrally. But that needs to be the main driver of our conversations. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you for the discussion. We'll put the recommendation that we receive the government consultation update report for February 2023. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, that brings our meeting to a close. Thank you all very much for your participation, and today we'll close with Karakia. I oha ki runga ki a ranganui, I oha ki raro ki a papatuanuku. Wakatairanga, te kupu, te kōrero, te mahi, ki te pō o te whare. Hei taonga, he mahi a muri, ka puta ki te wai au, ki te ao marama, humie, huie, taikie. We acknowledge, greet those things above. We greet those things below the earth in its entirety. Let's suspend the words, the discussion, debate, negotiations, the work covered to the pillar of the house as a treasure, point of importance to be revisited at a later time. So we may enter into enlightenment. Let it be bound and fixed. Yes, fixed. Let it be agreed by all. Amen. Thank you very much.